We'll take a quick look at the different types of sampling and survey methods that are out there. We kind of started this yesterday with the jelly blubbers, um, and then we'll look at actually giving them names today. So the first type of sample out there is a convenience sample, and that's where you only ask or measure subjects that are easiest to reach. Quick example, so this market research firm wants to just ask anyone what they think about the download times on this website. So anybody that wants to take it. You see this a lot with radios, right? People call in. The issue here is you pretty much just get people that are really, really interested or disinterested, right? You get the two strong sides. Either people really agree, people really disagree. You really don't get a feel for anybody in the middle. Uh, this was kind of like that first type of sampling you guys did yesterday at the Jelly Blubbers, where you just picked the 12 that you thought were best. Um, Next would be systematic. This is a type of sampling method where you ask or measure every nth subject. So to estimate the number of defects in a recent manufacturing batch, this will happen a lot with quality control in factories. They'll select every, X number of chips. So here they select every eighth chip that comes off the assembly line to get 140 chips, and then make a call from there. So um, here, uh, there's definitely an advantage to this type of method, especially like in a factory type setting, but there's also disadvantages here in that sometimes, every fifth or every sixth subject could have something in common. Um, Another type would be a cluster sample, where you determine a specific group and you measure every subject that's in that group. So this would be like when we threw out the net yesterday with the jelly blubbers. Once you drew your net, then you had to measure everything in the net. So here's a different example to determine the prevalence of human growth hormone among high school varsity players. The State Athletic Commission randomly selects 50 high schools, right? So these are their clusters, all of the different high schools. So they select these 50 high schools, but then everyone, once they pick the group, every member of the baseball team is tested for HGH. So you randomly pick which group you're going to go after, and then you got to do everything in the group. Kind of like you randomly picked, sort of, where to throw your net yesterday, and then once you had your net, then you had to figure out, you had to get the measurement for each one. Now the issue that some of you guys ran into yesterday, what if it's half in, half out? Do I count it? So that can start to be an issue with a cluster. The other thing is, again, clusters, sometimes you might miss a whole chunk of the population because, maybe if you cluster by neighborhoods, right? Different types of people live in different neighborhoods. So if you're going to do some kind of sampling in Raleigh and you use a cluster method for neighborhoods, all of a sudden, if you miss some neighborhoods, you might miss a whole demographic of people. So there's a disadvantage to cluster, but also an advantage here because you don't have to, you think about this example right here. If they randomly selected from every baseball player in the entire state, that'd be really, really difficult to collect data. So it's a little bit easier to collect data doing the cluster sampling method. One that's probably the best uh, method in theory, but it's really, really hard to do, is simple random sampling, where every member of the population gets a number, and then you use some kind of random method to determine which number or which person, which member, which plant, which animal you're measuring gets selected. This is hard to do because, when you think about the baseball example above, if you wanted to randomly select from all high school baseball players, that's a lot of people in a number, and it'd be really hard to collect that data. So an example of simple random, so 24 Hour Fitness wants to administer a satisfaction survey. So it takes its membership roster, numbers every club member, and then randomly selects 40 members. So the random selection, we saw this yesterday, take the human element out of it, and we got a random number generator and a calculator, right? And there's also things called random number tables, which we'll talk about in class. One more type of sampling is stratified random sampling, and where you create groups of similar subjects and randomly sample within those groups. This was kind of like the method we did where you picked 4 large, 4 medium, 4 small. You stratified and then got information from each of those. A really good way to think about stratification, like let's say that somebody's interested in figuring out kind of the student opinion at a school about something. So instead of just randomly picking from all students, well, maybe we feel like there's a difference between freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. So we'll stratify this. We'll divide the school population into your freshmen, the sophomore, junior, senior. I guess this is a college example, and then graduate students, because as people go through school, their opinions might differ. They might want different things from the school. And then once they're broken into their group, you're going to take a random sample from each class. Right? So you'd pick, 10 freshmen, 10 sophomores, 10 juniors, 10 seniors, 10 grad students. And those 10 are all, again, randomly selected using like a random number generator or something. And then if we decided to put multiple of these sampling techniques together, that would just something that would be called multi-stage sampling. And this has its advantage. So here's an example here. A statistics student is interested in finding the opinion of students on the food at lunch. Well, let's say they would like to, they want each class to be represented, right? Because freshmen and seniors probably have different opinions on school food, but it's hard to get a hold of everybody. So what we could do is if we randomly pick 2 theology classes and then survey all, so you'd pick 2 classes from each grade, right? So we'll have 2 freshman theologies, 2 sophomores, 2 junior, 2 senior theologies. There we've just stratified it. And then we've randomly picked those classes, and then we're going to talk to all the students in the classrooms. So since we're randomly picking which theology classes to talk to, once we talk to everyone in the class, that's where the cluster comes in. So another way, just a quick example of random number is how to get a random number is a random number table. And so there's questions like this that might pop up on the AP test where you're going to have to use a random number table. And really it's just a list of random digits. These spaces that are in between here, they don't mean anything. They're just so the list isn't overwhelming. It's just kind of break it up. So in this particular example, they're going to draw a sample size of 5 without replacement from a population of 50 households. So in other words, without replacement means that if you picked house 47 at the beginning, you can't use house 47 again. We're just not repeating. So what you're going to do, notice house 1 doesn't just get a 1, it's 0, 1. It needs a 2-digit number since we have up to 50 houses. And what we'll do, since we have 2-digit numbers here, we're going to go into the random number table and just start picking 2-digit numbers. So the first house we pick is 11. The second house we pick is 36. And then, like I said, this gap doesn't mean anything. So the third house is 23. And then the next house will be 56. However, we only went up to 50 if we look back over here. So 56 isn't used. Next house that we would pick is 92. That's not in our group. 96, not in our group. 23 would be the next house in order, but we've already got a 23, so we can skip 23. 79 is beyond us. There's the next house that we would pick at 8. So house 8 gets picked. And then finally house 42. So find that list of numbers down here in our answer choices and